Hi everyone, Jesse here with eTrailer. Today we'll be taking a look at and I'll show you how to install the Demco Air Force One supplemental braking system on our 2024 Ford Bronco. This braking system will be comprised of a few different components. We'll start here in the engine bay. This is our main unit. This is really the brains of the operation. Right here is where all of the air will get transferred, and you'll also hook up to a vacuum. But what this does is it takes air from your motorhome and sends it to an actuator. So how that actuator works is it will be mounted directly to your brake pedal. Then you'll have an anchor point mounted to the firewall. And whenever air gets sent to it, it will pull that brake pedal, allowing your towed vehicle to assist your motorhome in stopping. This kit also comes with an LED stoplight indicator, which is mounted to our rear view mirror here. This will light up whenever the brake pedal on your towed vehicle is working, just allowing you to know in the motorhome that everything's working correctly. These are okay, but if there's any kind of sun glare or maybe your backup camera is dirty in your motorhome, it's going to be hard to see. One thing I'd always recommend is adding a coach link, which is offered by Demco, which will sit on the dash of your motorhome, and it works wirelessly, so it'll light up right there in front of your face. You don't have to have any worries about not being able to see it. This kit is for motorhomes that have air brakes, hence the name Air Force One. So that means we had to run an air line to the front of our towed vehicle, connect it to this fitting here, which connects through a line to another fitting on our motorhome. So you will have to hook this up every time you hook your flat tow system up. But this goes into a tank, which we mounted up, and you'll also have to splice into your factory air brake lines on your motorhome. Here's just a quick look at the tank that we mounted in our motorhome. As you can see, we have this line going to the back. That's what we connect to with our towed vehicle. And then these two lines are what we tie into our factory air brakes. So with that being said, this is something that when you're installing it, you'll have to be crawling under your motorhome, and you'll have to be able to identify some airlines. So the installation process is a little bit difficult. If it's not something that you're looking to do yourself, maybe you don't have the time, the space, or the tools to do so, feel free to check out our dealer locator. If you are looking to get this set up yourself, then just follow along and I'll walk you through that process. If you have experience installing the Air Force One at all, and you just want to share some tips or tricks with us, please feel free to leave a review or a comment. The first step of our installation will be to find a good mounting point for our breakaway switch. Our base plate actually has a bracket right here for both our breakaway switch and our air fitting. I'm not going to bolt this in quite yet. I want to wait until we run the line down so I can easily get it hooked up, but it will slide right into that hole once we get there. Next, we'll find a place to mount our main unit. There's plenty of room in the engine bay. You can get creative. I chose to just use some hook and loop fasteners to adhere to the top of this fuse box here. I like it here because we're close to the vacuum lines that we'll have to tie into, and we're close to the battery and also the firewall, but you can put it anywhere you see fit. We have two wires coming off the back of our breakaway switch. We'll have to route those up into our engine bay behind the grill. I did have to extend them out, so the orange wire is now a brown wire. The black wire is now a blue wire. But with our orange wire, what I did was I used a heat shrink butt connector because we need to tie this into our fuse holder and then crimp a ring terminal onto that, get it connected to your battery. And on the other end, we have to extend, well, we have a red wire in our kit, so I just tied that in there. I extended that out. That's going to go inside the vehicle. Our black wire that's now blue will get connected to either one of these black wires. It doesn't matter. So you'll connect one black wire to that blue wire, and then the other one will get connected to a ground. So for our ground, you could just connect it to the battery, but I actually extended it out. I'm going to use this factory ground here. So I crimped a ring terminal onto some wire I had. I'll crimp our other black wire into that. It's just nice to have a little bit of extra slack so that we can get this wire tucked back here and hidden, and they'll still be able to access this fuse box. So we sent our red wire through along with a piece of airline tubing and another white wire because we'll have to ground off one of our components on the inside of the vehicle. So we'll jump inside the vehicle and I'll walk you through how to set up that actuator. So here's our actuator. As you can see, it's bolted to our brake pedal. The real tricky part about this is what we're looking for is a straight line from the actuator to our anchor here that we had to tie into the firewall. So what I'd recommend is just kind of loosely bolting it up, trying to get an idea of your best straight shot, and then look for a nice sturdy spot in the firewall. Use 3 self-tappers to get your bracket on there. And then you can kind of dial in the orientation of the anchor. As you can see, it's offset, so you can really fine-tune it. And once you get that all up in a line, get these tightened down with a 3/8 inch socket. One thing worth mentioning is with that cable, you will want a little bit of slack on it. You don't want it to be so tight that it's pulling on the brake pedal, but you also don't want it very loose. Just get that nice in between. And then the next step will be to wire in our reed switch that's connected to our actuator. That's what this wire coming off of it is. The blue wire coming out of our reed switch will tie into that white wire, which I grounded off in the engine bay. Then the violet wire will tie into our black wire on our indicator lights. Our indicator light will just come as an LED strip with some wiring coming off of it. On the back of that LED strip will be some double-sided tape. Best place to mount it will be on the back side of the mirror here. It's going to be hard to see from this angle, but once you get your mounting point figured out, you can start running the wires. What I did was I just hid it under these plastic panels here. I just kind of took a plastic trim tool, pried it up, and shoved our wire up. You can actually see it hanging out a little bit right there. I'll fix that, but yeah, just pry it along. And then when you come down here, I actually took off this handle that was here. There was 3 Torx screws holding it in. Took that off, and then I pulled off this plastic panel, and I was able to fish some airline tubing up and connect it to that wiring and pull it down. Made sure to keep it under here. But that wiring, as I said, the black wire ties into our reed switch. The red wire ties into that red wire that we pulled. We have power from our 12-volt battery, and we pulled it through the firewall. It just connects up with that. So to get our reed switch set up, I installed our fuse and our fuse holder, and now we'll just depress the pedal to take that slack off our cable, and we can pull back our actuator. What we want is to just have to pull it back a tiny bit, and you'll see that LED light light up. If it's already lit up in the position that you have it, then you'll have to move this bracket, and you just loosen it up, and you can move the reed switch back and forth. And same thing goes if you have to push the pedal or pull the actuator really far back. We just want a tiny little bit of movement. That way we know when our pedal is being depressed that we're getting the right signal. As for connecting our airline, simply cut it to length with a hose cutter or something very sharp and take it up to our quick connect here, push it in until it clicks. So that airline that we attach to the actuator connects into our air out. It's the same fitting as inside, just push it until it clicks. For the air in, that's going to be that bracket on the front that I showed you earlier. So I just routed it, trying to keep it out of the way of everything, and then it goes behind our grill here. I kind of just followed where our 2 wires from our breakaway switch went. So our fitting will come pre-attached to this L bracket here. Since I already have a nice hole with this bracket, I'm not going to use it. So I just disconnected it. And then if you're doing that, just make sure you use something to seal the threads, like Teflon tape or any other kind of pipe threader or pipe sealer. But from there, I just screwed it onto our bracket here, and this is where we'll connect it to our coach. Then for our vacuum line, one thing we need to do is just cut about 2 inches or so of tubing. Then put your check valve with the black side towards your main unit. Then we'll use the rest of our hose And these newer Fords are kind of tricky. There's two vacuum ports. The one up top is your actual vacuum lines. The one on the bottom will have just a electrical plug to it. That's your vacuum sensor. That's the port that we actually used. That's how Demco recommends you to do it. But we did have to get a separate part. There's a adapter with a T-fitting. That's hard to see on the vehicle here, but essentially you're tying this hose into the T-fitting. You're taking that sensor out, plugging it into the open hose end of the adapter, and then the adapter will have a 90-degree fitting that plugs right into the brake booster to replace where that sensor was. Once we have everything tested, I just recommend getting everything sealed up with some silicone to protect those connections. Now for the motorhome side, yours is probably going to look a little bit different. Motorhomes are just all made pretty differently. But our first step will be to mount our air tank assembly. Most important thing is this part here needs to be the lowest part when you mount it. You can have it at a slight angle just as long as that is the lowest part. And you also want something sturdy like some angle iron or frame. So I found a spot on ours towards the back right here. As long as we get those two bolts into that angle iron, this will hold just fine. So you can see the holes, or the spots that I've marked. I'm going to drill those out so we can use the included hardware. So once I got those holes drilled, I just slid the included bolts with a washer and topped it off with the nut. So you need a 9/16 inch wrench and socket to get these tightened down. The next thing you want to do is let all the air out of your air brakes. Just keep the engine off and pump your brake pedal until you lose your pressure. But then once that's done, we'll climb underneath our motorhome. We need to locate our supply line and our metered air line. I have them both marked with tape here. The smaller diameter is our metered air, and this green hose up here is our supply line. So what we'll be doing is just with a hose cutter or something very sharp, after cleaning up the hose just to get the best connection possible, we'll cut these. We'll tie in this T by simply pushing in on either side. You have two different diameter T's, so it'll be pretty easy to match up which one. And then we'll attach air lines from our kit to the other end of the T, or the bottom of the T, and we'll start running that to the rear of the motorhome. As far as routing your airlines, it really just depends on your setup. Main thing is to stay away from any hot or moving parts. Some advice would be to just find a wiring harness, like I did right at this point. I just stayed along the lines with this harness, and that went up to where we mounted our assembly. So once we make it back to our air tank assembly, our metered air will get plugged into the bottom piece here, and then our supply air will go straight into our tank. When installing these, you'll just want to push these firmly until you feel a click. Give it a few tugs to make sure it's engaged. With our remaining hose, we'll plug into our bottom port here, and then that's going to get routed towards the rear so that we can hook it up to our quick fitting in order to connect to our towed vehicle. So once we routed it up here, I just went through and zip tied everything down, made sure nothing was hanging loose. And then at this point, I used some loom clamps just to keep it nice and tight against this rail here. Also to keep it out of the way in case we ever need to get in here and remove these batteries. Now, as far as our quick fitting, it really depends on what side your corresponding fitting is on your towed vehicle. Ours is on the passenger side, so we're going to go right here. If yours is on the driver's side, you have a even better spot over on this side. But what I'll do is get it lined up where I want it. I'm trying to give a little bit of room for that 7-way there. Get it lined up. I'll mark the holes, and then I'll use the included hardware to get this fastened down. Now that we've made all of our connections, I let the motorhome idle enough to build up our pressure in our brakes. Now I'll go through and check all of our connections with some soapy water. That'll tell us if there's a leak. If we do have a leak, then we'll see bubbles. And if you do have a leak, then it's not that big of a deal. You just remove the hose by pushing in here, pulling the hose out, then recutting it, and try everything again. So I'll check all of our connections. Once we verified that there's no leaks, all that's left is to hook up to your towed vehicle. Then I'd start the motorhome back up, just run through the brakes a few times, make sure your actuator and your vehicle is working properly. But otherwise, that's going to do it for our look at and installation of the Demco Air Force One braking system on our 2024 Ford Bronco.